The most frequent complaints I hear from Gunpla builders posting images of their kits on the internet is that their kit is not the master grade Bal Ver Ka. The second most frequent complaint I hear is about how their master grade Bal Ver Ka has waterslide decals and how much of a pain in the ass waterslide decals tend to be. Actually, that last one might just be me. The actual second most frequent complaint I hear is how their photos aren't great because their camera isn't up to snuff. Well, if you've been following along, you now know how to pose your kit better, compose your photos better, and light your kits for maximum likes and upvotes and things. And the thing is, the camera you likely have in your pocket every day is so much more powerful than you give it credit for. How do I know? Aside from my absurdly expensive filmmaking degree and nominal freelancing experience, all of the photos you saw at the beginning of this video were taken with this. This is a Durkon. The Durkon came in an old Soviet magazine back in the 70s, like literally in the magazine, as in one of its pages. The original page is now online, so I printed it out, folded it up, stuck some cardboard behind the film for minimum light leakage, and that's about it. So you wouldn't download a car, but you can download a camera, so how is it to use? Frankly, it's shite. Pinhole cameras were the first cameras, and the crude nature of their use hasn't aged well into the era of Facetube. You control exposure manually, as in with your fingers, and basically have to guess if your shot is in focus or bright enough. Your viewfinder is non-existent, and image stabilization depends on the wind. If I'm talking Greek to you right now, don't worry, because today we're going to take your hobby photography, and photography skills in general, to a new level. How many times have you yourself or someone you know or seen online said, "Sorry about the quality, I'm using a phone camera," to excuse a poor photo? This is a lame excuse. We take pride, usually, in the kits we build, and our photos have to reflect that. In a way, hobbyists are artists, and you don't see painters saying, "Sorry, my print sucks, I used my mom's Epson machine and printed it out for my Facebook feed." Well, you might every so often if the artist is extra starving, but in general, any serious artist showcasing their work is going to showcase it with the best representation they can. As I referenced earlier, you don't need a fancy DSLR with expensive lenses to do this either. Though you probably don't want to use the Durkon either, so instead, consider using the sum total of all human knowledge you carry around in your pants. I don't need to tell you what this is. It's an iPhone. And I already see you writing that Android Master Race comment. Both of them have their merits. You do you. I really don't care. At all. Stop it. The built-in camera app isn't too bad, and frankly, most standard camera apps, Android included, will take decent pictures in good lighting. If you don't know how to light good, watch my lighting video. You'll thank me later. Although it lacks fine manual controls, you can adjust the exposure settings right from the preview screen. Simply tap and hold on the screen until you see the focus box, the thing jumping around the ball on the frame, jump a little bit, then drag your finger up and down to adjust the brightness. It's simple, sure, so if you want proper control over your smartphone's camera, we'll be looking elsewhere. There are plenty of professional camera apps out there, and their performance is largely similar. App compatibility with the camera's hardware necessitates this, so the main differences are in terms of app performance and usability. For example, ProShot looks great. It's easy to control and provides a myriad of different options. Right up to the point it crashes on you after recording for a few minutes and deletes your footage. Or decides that the recording indicator is an illusion and never tries at all. VSCO is another popular camera app, and it will make you look like a wise professional with its minimal interface. Plus, it has plenty of in-app editing options once you're done shooting. A nice touch. While very pretty, navigating the UI and deciphering the hieroglyphs it uses to represent simple camera functions is quite tedious. Not something you want to deal with when you're taking some quick shots out and about. So, what should you use? Personally, I recommend the app Procam. It's $5, but I'm a spoiled child in the digital age and I want all my apps free, you say. Fine, whatever, download VSCO or Shutter and spend 30 minutes finding the ISO button. But seriously, $5 for Procam is worth it. It's the app that the rest of this video will feature. After using it almost exclusively for my photos and videos for the last 6 months, I feel it's the best camera app for small subjects, such as, I don't know, Gundam plastic model kits. So, we've got our app. Neat. So what the hell do all these buttons do? Procam is broken up into 3 sections. They don't have names, so I'm gonna make up some. On the left is the Take Picture or Video bar. At the top is a view of your gallery with the latest pictures displayed, followed by an arrow that leads to a bunch of settings. This pane gives you options for time-lapse video, think sunsets and blooming flowers and such like you see on the Discovery Channel, regular video, natch, and a photo mode. Then we get to the cool stuff. Night mode is best for extreme low light situations. It's going to be in black and white, but you'll be able to take pictures almost in complete darkness. Burst mode takes photos rapidly for fast action sequences, and slow shutter, possibly ProShot's best feature, allows you to take long exposure shots. Long exposure or slow shutter photography is a godsend for low light and night photos, and I'll explain why in a moment. Next to these, you're presented with resolution and aspect ratio options, and finally, grid options. Remember that rule of thirds thing I told you guys about in my composition video? This is how you turn it on. And it even has the golden spiral, which, as I mentioned briefly in the same video, is the fancy Greek math version of the rule of thirds. This big button does the same thing a big button does on any camera. Takes a picture or starts recording a video. Tap it again in video mode to stop the video. Obviously. In video mode, you also have a little camera under this button that lets you take photos while recording the video. In photo mode, this is replaced with a timer. The Set button allows you to control several advanced functions of the camera, such as ISO priority and a light level histogram. You can even turn on a copyright watermark if you so choose. Directly to the right of this first bank of buttons is a dial that performs different functions depending on what the selected option is to the right of that. And that's this bank of controls, where Procam really starts to shine, as these are the camera's manual functions. Touch any of these buttons, then adjust their settings with the dial to the left. Obviously, you don't want to touch them when you're looking at the video, that's just going to make fingerprints and stuff. As I mentioned before, a bank of controls like this can be found on pretty much any advanced camera app, but I personally prefer Procam for its reliability. Plus, these are the same kind of controls you would find on a more advanced DSLR. Getting familiar with what they do on your smartphone will greatly improve your photos when you graduate to a larger camera. After all, you can go out and buy a Lamborghini, but that doesn't automatically make you a race car driver. So let's start from the top. The first option controls your camera's exposure. Exposure, in basic terms, controls the size of the camera's aperture, or how much light enters the camera at a time. Think of how big your pupils got when you ate that thing that shady guy behind your school gave you that one time. It's kinda like that. Next is shutter speed. This determines how long light is allowed to pass through the camera's aperture. These two functions in tandem determine how bright or how crisp an image can be. Using a very fast shutter speed, like 1/1000th of a second, will make your images darker, but the image will be much, much sharper. This is because the camera does not have time to pick up the tiny movements that occur when you take a photo. Obviously, if an image is too dark, more lighting will improve this. The inverse is true as well. By increasing the shutter speed up to around 3 or 4 seconds, you can create some really awesome lighting effects, and if you're in pitch darkness, still get very high quality images with minimal light. Just make sure you have something to stabilize your camera, like a tripod. Are you starting to see how all this photo, video, lighting, aperture, shutter stuff is starting to come together? No? Then go watch my lighting video again. It's fine. I'll wait. Caught up now? Good. The next control is a bit more difficult to explain, and it's called ISO. Back in the days before Instagram and before Gundam Twilight Axis united us as something we can all complain about, cameras used to take pictures with something called film. This material used the light passing through the aperture of the camera to create an image that was printed at a place called a Ritz Camera on Wood Street. There are rumors that pharmacies preserve these developing machines for unknown reasons. How sensitive this film stuff was to light depends on what film you bought. ISO, which stands for International Standards Organization, refers to a standardized, imagine that, measure of sensitivity of emulsion-based film, with 100 ISO being not so sensitive, in the standard ISO used by most people, to 1600 ISO, which is extremely sensitive. For a normal, sometimes called digital camera, the ISO setting simulates this same level of sensitivity. Basically, the lower the number, the darker your image. The higher the number, the brighter your image. Be careful though. As your ISO number increases, the amount of grainy noise in the photo increases as well. In all seriousness, many people think their smartphones are not viable for photography because of how grainy the photos are when they're taken. This is because the automatic camera settings will almost always set to an ISO setting way higher than it needs to be. Crank that down as low as you can, add some lights, and the results will be spectacular. Beneath the ISO settings is your focus options. If you watched my composition video, you know all about depth of field and therefore already know what focus does. You haven't watched it yet. I told you earlier to watch the damn thing. Go do that. I will wait. You good? Good. Don't lie to me again, asshole. White balance makes up for how warm or cool your lighting is. These, of course, being things you learned in my lighting video, and I'm not stopping again if you still haven't watched it yet. That's on you now. And finally, this button locks all these functions in place. By default, any setting that doesn't have the letter L next to them will be automatically adjusted when the camera thinks there's a need to. Locking the functions in place ensures that your image is exactly how you fine-tuned it. If you want to keep some settings automatic, that's perfectly fine. Say you want the camera to control anything not locked in place. You can tap anywhere within the preview window and the camera will do some math to figure out what it thinks will make your image look gooder. At the top right, we have controls for the camera's flash, and a few buttons if you want to cheat and make your photos look better on your computer. Turning on the RAW or TIFF settings will make a highly detailed version of your image intended for exporting to a computer and editing within. Be warned, with either of these settings, your images will roughly quintuple in file size, so make sure your phone has enough space to handle it. Then there's also an HDR function where the camera takes 3 images and blends the best parts of each of the images together to make one really good image, and an AEB option which controls how the HDR function works for each sampled image. You'll probably not use those very much. Don't worry about them. Sometimes HDR looks good, sometimes it makes your photo look ridiculous. Give it a try if you want, but there's not a lot of detail that I'm going to go into with those things for this video. Maybe some other time. At the bottom right, we have a button that switches from back camera to front and back again. If your head is literally spinning right now, that is fine because that is a damn lot of functions. Now, it's up to you to play with these. Each of the functions work in tandem with one another, and you will need to experiment with each one to get your shots perfect. Adjusting your shutter speed might mean opening your aperture wider while also increasing your ISO a bit, for example. Just like anything photo related, you have to go out and do it. I encourage you to snag a kit you like, go to the park and just shoot for a while. See how different backdrops and scenery impact the behavior of the settings you just learned, and don't worry, unlike our ancestors, you can take more than 36 photos at once. Can you believe that? A roll of film stuff could only take a couple dozen photos at once. That's just barbarism. Even if you only make bad Gunpla, your photos should at least make them look a little better now. Better poses, better lighting, better composition, and now the knowledge of how to take full control of your images. Pop into Discord in the description sometime and show us what you've done with your newfound wealth of knowledge. I'll see you there.